Hi Real Writers, this week's episode, a few of these have been recorded in advance because it's end of 2024, is the what should you write next? A lot of people ask this, what should I write next? I've done a bit of analysis and I've got more space over here because I'm going to be putting some images up. The first thing is, I'm going to talk about indie films, not big studio films that are hundreds of millions of dollars. In the indie world, what you may be considered as your first thing you may sell if you're into that sort of thing. First question is, what are the average budgets for these sorts of things? So what is the amount that you may have to raise, or what are other people going to raise? And it'll give you an idea of the scope of what you could write. So up with the graphic. Horror films go anywhere from under $1 million, so around $100,000, up to $5 million in the indie space. That's the average budget for a horror. A thriller starts around the 1 million and goes up to 10 million. These are average costs over the last couple of years for this sort of genre. Action is 5 million up to 20 million. In this data that I looked at, they had John Wick as an indie film because it was made by an independent studio. So that top end of 20 might come back a bit, but it gives you an action film as more expensive because it has set pieces, stunt work, has physical gags, like rigging and so forth, where a thriller is acting, and same with horror. Horror can still have some physical effects, and I've spoken about this before about budgets being pushed up. The Hostage, when that was being made, makeup effects, continuity, they were talking about budget changes, as in we'll hit this guy in the stomach rather than in the face because we'll have to have makeup by the next couple of days and that'll add this cost in. So horror, the blood effects, blood continuity, these sorts of things can creep those up, maybe more than a standard thriller. Action is the big one. Drama, again, down to the $500,000, $100,000 up to about 10 million. This could be because there's going to be crowds, there's going to be restaurant scenes, there's going to be a little bit more that can push the price of a drama up. But you could keep it as low. If you think about it, a horror and a drama can be very similar, except there's no fear in the drama. You could make a contained drama. It could be two people in an apartment. It could be people having dinner and talking. It could be camping in the mountains. It could be there was an Australian film, can't remember what it was about or what it was called. Two people came up from deep sea diving and the boat had gone. So that film probably wouldn't have been that cheap to make because you had, safety concerns of people in water, but it was just two people floating in an ocean. And the last genre is comedy, which is from 1 to 10 million. So you can see that 10 million is going to get you, and sub 10 is going to get you into most things, and even the lower end of action films. And if you write to 5 million, and you begin to learn and you'll have to study and figure out stuff. I've got other videos on what drives budget up. 5 million gets you in all the genres, and if you get a $5 million action that reads well, it might even be good to have around. Okay, let's look at the earnings for these films. This is the average earnings across the last couple of years for films in these genres. This is also, it's hard to do with streaming, but this was Cinematake and published distribution figures. And it'll show you the ones that are higher and profitable, and it'll answer one of those questions that people tend to ask a lot. The first one off our rank, image up there. Horror at 18.1 million. Now, if the top end of an indie horror is 5, and the average takings for a horror is 18, you can see that they're instantly profitable. That's why they're so popular. They're not expensive to make, but they've got a built-in audience, and the average taking for a horror film, is 18 million. A thriller, 14.3 is the average takings, which means some are going to lose, some are going to make money, because if we take the average between 1 and 10, so the average film thriller to make is going to be about the 5 to 6 mark, and it's 14 as the average takings. They're still profitable. The next one it's the anomaly. Again, 46 million for action, but in there we've got some big films. We've got the John Wicks. We've got those things some of those movies that you see streaming, but they're set in the Middle East and there's a bunch of guys going to rescue somebody, or they could be expensive to make. They could be up in that 15 million mark, and it's 46 is the average taking. So there's still a big risk there, because at the average, half the films have to be under 46, half have to be over. for it to be the average. Drama, 6.3. This is the riskier one of them because the budgets go from 1 to 10, and if the average taking is only 6.3, it means that they're very high risk because the average 6.3 of the takings and the average between like 10 and 1 is 5. There's only $1 million play in that little bit right there. There's not much wiggle room. So a drama might be slightly harder to sell because it's a slightly higher risk. And comedy, 14 million. Again, it's going to be profitable because everyone's got a desire to see something that's amusing. But horror seems to be the easy cab off the rank, and that's why they're popular. Okay, but now let's look at some more figures. What has been popular in streaming and exhibition since 2020? So this is a 5-year arc. This is what I look at the data on. Adventure films have been popular since 2020. So I'm taking, that's probably the re-releases of some of the Indiana Jones films, Star Trek, Star Wars. The sci-fi might be up in there in that adventure. Sci-fi didn't appear in this. The Marvel movies probably are adventure films. Action film, the next one's down, so the John Wicks, maybe a Fast and your Furiouses. But third cab off the rank in popularity is horror again, then comedy, then drama. So the bigger budgets will bring a bigger audience. But then we've got that little horror hanging right in there as a good steady thing. Now, what gets made the most? And of course, this is going to be a bit obvious if we go back to that budget versus takings thing in the indie film world. The MGM, what gets made the most? First cab off the rank is, of course, horror. Horror, cheaper to make, as we saw, pretty much guaranteed a good profit. Drama is the second one, again, because it's just like horror, maybe even slightly cheaper to make if you're not going to have blood effects and so forth. Comedy, that's a funny version of a drama. So these are things that don't rely on the practical effects. Suspense and thrillers are the next. Romances don't get made as much, but docos came right in there. Action and adventure weren't really in the what gets made the most in the indie world. Docos seem to get funded a lot, it makes sense. Things that never get funded in the indie world apparently are period pieces because of the high cost of production, as in getting the things made. So even if you're thinking, oh, I'll set mine in the 80s or in the 60s or in the 70s, think about even setting it in the 80s. 80s cars are beginning to get hard to find. They're starting to go up in value. So if you have to have 4 or 5 cars in a street, or you have to have someone driving a car, or you have to have, if you don't want to even crash one, an 80s car would be so expensive to get fixed. Even just setting it back in the 80s or even in the 90s, suddenly things have to be, that little bit extra effort has to be taken to make sure that everything is age appropriate. They're in the guitar world. People talk about Back to the Future, and the guitar that Michael J. Fox plays didn't come out to 1957, I think, 2 years after he was supposed to go back in time. It's a Gibson 335E, 335. Anyway, it didn't come out until after he went back. So it couldn't have been in the concert. Little things like that you have to, and Robert Zemeckis had all the money to make sure that continuity was correct and guitar continuity was correct. Small thing, doesn't matter. So horror seems to be the winner here. Now, in the research, people were talking about the horror genre, and what seems to really be kicking it a lot in horror is what they call elevated horror. So we're not talking slasher films, we're not talking the obvious thing where these people go to a cabin, they're all going to get killed except one. That is having its day. Still popular, still good, because people are in there for the spectacle, like watching football. But it's the elevated horror that they seem to think, or like the articles I was reading and the data I was seeing, is the ones that are popular. So things like the Get Out, I suppose The Quiet Place would be an elevated horror, where the concept is where you can't talk, and it brings people to think about the horror. The horror itself has to be something you think about and you consider. I'm trying to think of more off the top of my head. Sorry, I should have written them down. But Midsummer is an elevated horror. Those things that make you think, and it's not just a standard, put people here, put them in danger, this thing wins, kills them off. Scenarios make people think. So it's more of a drama, which is really scary. those seem to be the things that are good. So if you're a drama writer or even a comedy writer, which comedy and drama is very, very similar, but comedy's a bit harder to do because not everyone has the same sense of humour, so to make something broadly funny is very, very difficult. It wouldn't be that hard for you to start developing some muscles in that high-end, high-concept horror, which may get you into an indie film. And then if it's a high-concept horror, you could then bring across your drama chops, maybe bring across some comedy when you try to capitalise on that sale of that script. Thank you to everyone who's been commenting. That's fantastic. The thumbs up and all that stuff is great. Some of these have been recorded in advance because it's the end of the holiday stuff. The book is over there. Tools Not Rules. It's not a screenwriting book. It is, but it's just ways of solving problems what you may come across, like how to develop characters, how to develop genre, how to develop world. It doesn't tell you screenwriting formats or anything like that. It's based on the tools that we've used in law enforcement and the intel world to develop profiles of people and things and gangs and locations, all been turned on their head to be used in writing. 20% off for you at writerduet. I get nothing out of that, you know that. But if you want to try it, writerduet, 20%, and you can get a trial version. There's writer solo as well, but go with the writerduet and check that out. And until next time, guys, keep writing. Bye.